When I moved into that old building, all I wanted was a fresh start. After years of trying to maintain emotional stability and escape the labels that followed me since adolescence, I accepted a job in a small town, hoping to start over. I left behind a place where every mood swing sparked gossip, where people never knew whether to treat me with empathy or fear. In this new town, no one knew my name, and that was freeing. Apartment 303 was offered at an unbelievably low price. Located in a 4-story building, old but quiet, with a view of the park and just minutes from my new job. The superintendent, an older man with a quiet voice named Albert, handed me the keys with a strange expression. He asked if I had lived there before. I said no, it was my first time in town. He stared for a moment longer than he should have, as if wanting to say something, then simply nodded and walked away. The first few days were smooth. Routine helped. Wake up early, go to work, walk through the park, shower, dinner, read, sleep. But after a few nights, things began to unravel. First came the noises, footsteps in the hallway at 3 a.m., even though I lived on the top floor. Then small things out of place, the remote on top of the fridge, the bathroom faucet dripping even when fully tightened. I began writing everything in a notebook. Thought it was just fatigue, an adjustment phase. But on the 5th day, an older lady from the 2nd floor stopped me in the hallway and smiled like she knew me. "You're back," she said before I could reply. "Different name this time, huh?" I laughed awkwardly. "My name's Ryan." She looked at me with pity. "Sure, last time it was Vincent." That hit me hard. I'd never been called that name before. But that night it got worse. I woke to the TV buzzing with static. I was sure I'd turned it off. The screen was dark, and in the center, glowing white text read, "Vincent, wake up." I stood frozen for minutes, staring at a name I never used, a name that now seemed to know exactly where to find me. I turned off the TV and tried to convince myself it was a dream or maybe sleep-deprived hallucination. But the next morning, when I went to grab my notebook, something was written that I didn't remember adding. A single sentence, shaky and in my own handwriting. "This isn't the first time." I tried to ignore it. Threw myself into work, extended my walk, spent longer at the market. But everything fell off. People looked at me as if they recognized me. A child in the park smiled and said, "You again?" A clerk at the bakery asked if I had moved back into the same apartment. I didn't know what to say. It started to feel like I was stepping into someone else's life, or worse, returning to a role I didn't remember ever playing. That night, the air in the apartment felt heavier. The bedside lamp flickered as if unsure it should stay on. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face and saw something strange in the mirror. My reflection wasn't quite right. It copied me with a slight delay, like we were out of sync. I stumbled back, heart racing. I avoided every mirror in the apartment after that. Before bed, I closed every door, shut off all electronics, and left the notebook on my nightstand. I wrote everything down again, the stairs, the mirror, the name. And once more I promised myself, if anything strange happened that night, I'd leave the apartment the next day. But that was the night the voices started. Muffled whispers came from the hallway. Different voices, some crying, some softly chanting my name. Or rather, the name that wasn't mine. "Vincent, come back to us," they said. "We need you whole." I curled up in bed, hands over my ears, heart pounding. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Just silent tears. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure if what I was feeling was mine, or someone else's memory. I began avoiding sleep. Not because of nightmares, but because of what lingered between the moment I closed my eyes and the moment the voices began. It felt like the apartment was waiting for me to drop my guard. Like the silence itself was hunting me. I spent 2 nights wide awake, wandering the living room, lying on the couch with the TV on low, not for comfort, but to drown out whatever whispered in the dark. By the 3rd sleepless night, something inside me started to crack. My thoughts were jumbled, reality slipping like sand through my fingers. I'd find entries in the notebook that I didn't remember writing. Disjointed phrases, strange symbols, childish at first glance, but ominous. One page showed a hand-drawn map of the building. Apartment 303 was circled in red. In the center, in shaky letters like a child's, one word: me. That's when I decided to find Albert, the superintendent. I went down to the lobby, but as always, the desk was empty. This time, though, the back door was left ajar. I followed a narrow hallway, unsure if I was intruding or just desperate. I found a dim, cluttered room filled with folders, keys hanging on hooks, and boxes with handwritten labels. One caught my eye: Tenants 303. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dozens of old cards. Names, move-in dates, no move-out records. Some were stained, others torn. But nearly all shared one detail. The current status field was scratched out. And almost every first name was Vincent. Different last names, different handwriting, but the same name, obsessively repeated. Behind me, something fell. I turned quickly. A cassette tape lay on the floor, fallen from a shelf. The label read, 303, final entry. I picked it up and returned to my apartment, as if drawn by instinct. I found an old tape player in a drawer, slid the cassette in, and pressed play. Static. Then heavy breathing. Then my voice. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. He's already inside. A loud noise cut the message, followed by a muffled scream, and something that sounded like furniture being dragged. Then silence. And finally a whisper. Ryan never existed. I dropped the recorder, panic rising from deep inside. Not just because the voice was mine, but because I knew that recording wasn't old. The dust around the player showed it hadn't been touched in years, but the tape itself was still warm. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. That night, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I ran down the stairs, barely able to breathe, and collapsed onto a concrete bench in the plaza across the street. The cold wind against my skin grounded me, gave me something real to hold on to. I replayed every strange moment. The woman calling me Vincent, the neighbors who acted like they knew me, Albert's silent stares. They all knew. They just pretended I didn't. I sat for hours watching the building. All windows dark. The elevator occasionally lit up on its own, even though no one used it. And then I saw it. At the window of my apartment, someone was staring out. A silhouette, still and hunched, like it had been waiting for me to notice. And I did. I knew what it would do next. It would raise its hand. And it did. The figure waved slowly. I returned to the apartment, still trembling, but now with a strange fury driving me. I couldn't run anymore. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and walked straight to the bathroom mirror. I stared at my reflection. For a while it looked normal. Then it smiled. I didn't. A small, forced smile. A test. Who are you? I whispered, throat dry. The reflection tilted its head slowly. Then, raised a hand and pointed toward the door behind me. I turned. The bedroom door was ajar. And inside, something was breathing. I didn't have the courage to enter. But I couldn't leave either. I sat on the hallway floor, eyes fixed on the darkness within the room. The sound of breathing grew louder. Closer. As if it was waiting for me to speak aloud. The name. The real one. But I knew, if I said it, it would answer. I sat there the entire night, listening to the breathing filling the hallway like a slow, rising tide. At some point, time slipped away. The world outside no longer existed. No morning sun. No birds. No traffic. Just the breathing. And the thing that knew I was there. Waiting. When the sound finally stopped, I stood up, legs numb and head throbbing, but with a gnawing certainty that it wasn't over. I stepped into the bedroom. It was empty. But on the bed, the notebook was open. The same notebook I'd been using all along. The pages were covered in symbols and scribbles I didn't recognize. And on the last page, scrawled in thick letters, "Now you remember." Below that, a list of dates. All the same, March 30th, repeated over and over. It hit me. Every time I moved into apartment 303, it was on the same day. Like I was trapped in a cycle, endlessly looping back to where it all started. Every identity, every version of me, fragments of a story rewriting itself. And I never remembered. Until now. The doorbell rang. My heart nearly stopped. I walked to the door in a daze. Looked through the peephole. Nothing. But under the door, someone had slipped an envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. "Vincent, it's time to stop running. You know where it began. You know how it ends." On the back, an address, an abandoned psychiatric hospital. The the same one listed in the old tenant records, and the name of patient 303, Vincent A. Clark. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time said it out loud. My name is Vincent. The apartment sighed, like it had been waiting. Then everything went dark. The lights died, the floor trembled, and something inside me unlocked, like a forgotten door finally opening. If you're hearing this, remember, some names should never be forgotten. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's waiting in the dark. It's remembering who you really are.